Cities are prime locations within Flight Simulator 2020, and there are many to visit. Easily among the most famous cities in the world, London is full of iconic locations, buildings and historical sites. Much like all the cities within the sim, London is full of gorgeous graphics, but it also has many problems, which include significant inaccuracies and missing buildings. Let's take a look. Now, the cities within the new Microsoft Flight Simulator are totally amazing. We've all seen the videos of New York, San Francisco, Florence, and indeed many other locations. All of these are extremely accurate representations of the real world. This is achieved by using Big Maps 3D data, which is pulled from a variety of different sources. But not all cities have this level of detail available to them. When the vast 3D data isn't available, Flight Simulator instead generates the buildings from generic assets, placing them where it believes they should be based upon what available data it does have access to. In many cases, this is also improved with some unique handcrafted assets. London then is one such city that is not accurate to the real world. Don't get me wrong, it looks great, but it suffers from numerous problems. Before we go any further though, I want to preface the rest of this video with a very important point. The version of the sim I'm using here is the same version that is being beta tested. That means that this isn't the final product. There will be some changes, there will be some improvements. However, release is now very close, so it's unlikely there will be hundreds of significant changes. Also, beyond release, Flight Simulator 2020 will continue to receive regular updates and improvements. So then, what are the issues that make London a beautiful but flawed city? Well, let's start with the river. As with many other things in the sim, the river is basically constructed from satellite imagery, but that does pose a few problems if it hasn't been handcrafted or doesn't have photogrammetry data. We can see that with the HMS Belfast. This is actually the same story with many ships and boats. The top-down aerial photography is obviously only 2D, and the game therefore interprets it as such. Now, like I say, this may change, but I think it's well worth being aware of some of the things that are currently going on right now. But for every flaw, there's also a stunningly accurate piece of scenery. This is the Shard, the tallest building in London, and it looks absolutely gorgeous. There's so many details going on here. As we move up towards the top of the building, you can see through each of the windows into each individual room, which each have a 3D representation. The Palace of Westminster is also another handcrafted asset. This really does prove a point. It's a great location, which is unfortunately lit down somewhat by a submerged Westminster Bridge. Not all locations are handcrafted, however. Here we have the Victoria Memorial as well as Buckingham Palace. Clearly very wrong and currently using generic assets. This leads me to think that they will likely be changed, at least hopefully, when the sim is finally released. But just a word of warning there, just in case it's something you're very keen in seeing. The O2 Arena, meanwhile, looks very good, very accurate, perfectly represented here. Meanwhile, the Thames Barrier is completely missing. However, the London City Airport is here and pretty much intact. It really is then the same story all throughout London. There's some beautifully handcrafted locations, there's some very good auto-generated locations that pretty much match what they should look like, but there's also unfortunately some significant flaws which overall mar the entire London experience. And not to mention there are a whole load of buildings either inaccurate or just missing. Case in point, this is the Gherkin and surrounding buildings, clearly entirely wrong. The list then goes on. Missing sites such as the London Eye, combined with great looking areas such as the River Thames itself. There's still time for this to be improved, of course, before release. However, London is far from the only city in the world in this condition. There are numerous others. Whether or not these get improved by release may well turn out to be a moot point for many people. Microsoft have confirmed that there will be ongoing free updates to Flight Simulator 2020, and in fact there are two so-called world updates scheduled for the months after release. How much this will bother people though will be a personal thing. After all, Microsoft Flight Simulator is very much about the flight experience. Already out of the box, it offers vastly more than any other flight sim. Honestly, there's nothing else out there that can compare, at least not without spending hundreds and maybe even thousands of dollars first. Ultimately though, in my own personal opinion, regardless of the flaws, which also include the water hill as you saw in my river landing just there, the new Microsoft Flight Simulator is stunning, and even with some missing buildings and some inaccuracies, London still manages to look completely amazing. As always, thanks for watching, and I'll catch you guys and girls next time.